The Brutally Delicious Podcast. The Brutally Delicious Podcast. The Brutally Delicious Podcast. The Brutally Delicious Podcast.
What's up, everybody? This is Dark Macek with Brutally Delicious, coming at you with a review of Extrema's 2019 album, Headbanging Forever. I think that's the first time it was not brand new. So this is a band I had never heard of before. I don't mean hadn't heard a song, I mean literally had never heard of them. So going into this cold, I figured that an album title like Headbanging Forever meant that this was a throwback band. And instead of telling you how surprised I was at the outlay, I'm going to just start going into songs and describe my surprise to you that way. My immediate vibe at the opening of the album was, this is like classic metal with modern elements, kind of fitting in with that throwback theme. It is downtuned and the drums are definitely heavy, but the vibe, I guess you'd call it, is classic. I'm thinking of like Spirits of Fire, which is Chris Caffrey's band. It's had Tim Ripper Owens and Fabio Leone on vocals. For both of these bands, sonically it does not sound like something from the 70s or 80s, but the vibe is still there. Consider how something like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia relates to Seinfeld. They're two different styles of humor, but Sunny is clearly the spiritual successor and took a lot of cues from it. They just amped it all up. Now, there is an element of surprise here, which is as soon as the vocals come in, I start thinking Avenged Sevenfold. This guy sounds a lot like M. Shadows. By the by, I'm talking like City of Evil Avenged Sevenfold, not modern. So in that way, this band is both classic and modern, and I'm saying modern in a sense that it sounds like metal from 20 years ago because I don't want to admit that I'm old. Now, moving on, the second track, Borders of Fire. This main riff is more Lamb of God than Priest, so now we've got some groove going on. It's definitely an interesting amalgamation of styles, because earlier I said, kind of like throwback, sounds like a modern take on Judas Priest. Then the vocals sound like Avenged Sevenfold, and now we're looking at like groove metal, which is, kind of persisted. I don't think it sounds like whatever Five Finger Death Punch became, but, post-Pantera. After this point in the album, I went and checked to make sure that this wasn't an M. Shadows side project that I had just never heard of, because the vocals are that similar. And consider my surprise when I found out this band has been around since 1986. I was previously saying throwback. No, this isn't like that Pepsi with real sugar that Walmart has. This is like the local brewery that's been around for a while. Perhaps what's most surprising about this is that there aren't many bands from 1986 that kept up that much. The bands I've likened them to, two of them hit their heyday after the year 2000. So I suppose Overkill sometimes sounds pretty heavy. I mean, they have Jason Bittner on drums now. He was in Shadows Fall. I guess Exodus really got heavier with time. But for sure, this band does not sound like a bunch of aging metalheads trying to stay relevant. No, it sounds fresh. Moving on to some more songs. Pitch Black Eyes. Really good drumming here. Like I'm saying, definitely kept with the times. Makes me think of like, Judas Priest picked up Scott Travis and released the quintessential speed metal album just by adding in fresh blood. There's the Journey approach, which is just replace the singer with somebody a little bit younger and keep everybody else. But then the Judas Priest one, I think, works way better for metal. Point being, not a typical 1986 band. The title track, Headbanging Forever. Is there an intentional homage to Rapid Fire by Judas Priest here? There's a really cool riff that sounds just like the bridge riff before the solos come in. This is clearly a nostalgia track of sorts, so I think it is intentional and I think it works. Other examples of this in the metal mythos. Annihilator has a song called Army of One, and Destruction has a song called Thrash Till Death. More self-referential, but Megadeth has that song Victory at the end of Euthanasia. Moving on, Invisible Forever, another song with a really good groove and more of that modern style, again meeting the mid-aughts. God, I'm old. Moving on, the song Paralyzed, a really nice modern groove, sorry to sound like a broken record. The drums are killer here, like better than in the other tracks I already praised the drumming on. It reminds me of something. I spent a couple minutes trying to identify that, but I can't place it. Can any of you listeners help me out here? What does Paralyzed remind you of drum-wise? Last but not least, the song The Showdown. This feels very American, like Battlecross meets Pantera meets A7X with some classic metal melody thrown in. There was a band last year I reviewed called Bark. and I had a similar sentiment, which is that band sounds like they're from fucking Texas. They absolutely did not sound like they were from Belgium. And at no point does Extrema sound like they are from fucking Italy on this track. There's a really neat riff in the chorus that sounds like something Judas Priest or Megadeth might do, much more melodic than the rest of the song, but it gels nicely. It's a good, I used the word previously, amalgamation. Okay, so really fun album that bridges multiple styles, and I also clearly need to broaden my horizons on what bands from certain countries sound like. My idea of any Italian band is they have a heavy keyboard presence because Flesh God Apocalypse and Rhapsody do. I could give some circle jerk speech here on how music breaks down barriers, but this band actually challenged me. Thanks for defying the stereotypes. We always need people like you. Rock on.
Ever wonder what a punch from Elton John feels like?
Or how you'd cope with having turned down the chance to be in Nirvana?
Or what signal Keith Richards gives when he wants you to get the hell out of his hotel room?
Fans of Too Much Effing Perspective don't have to wonder, because they've heard these exact stories and a jillion others on our podcast. I'm Alex Hoffman, former tour manager for Radiohead.
And I'm musician and comedy writer Alan Keller. On the TMEP show, we get guests like Nancy Wilson from Heart, Jeremiah Freites from the Lumineers, and Modern Family's Julie Bowen to tell us things they may have only shared with their therapist, clergy, or a TMZ stringer.
So join us on Too Much Effing Perspective. That's EFFING Perspective. The only podcast you crank up to 11.